Welcome to the ISO Show, dispelling myths and sharing tips for success to improve your business with ISO standards.
If you're listening to this podcast, then you're in great company. We've got thousands of listeners who have a thirst for continual improvement and raising standards in business. Whether your interest is in quality, sustainability, or risk standards, I'd love to welcome you as a member to our online platform for all things ISO, the ISology Hub. The ISology Hub is the leading place to get access to all of your online resources, from in-depth training courses through to our very popular coffee break training, to templates and action plans and many other resources to help raise standards. As a member, you get access to over 100 courses, taking you from learner to practitioner to leader. The ISology Hub has all the resources that you need, which will really help to make your life easier and to help improve compliance in those business critical areas. So if you'd like access to learning and compliance resources ranging from data privacy to environmental management, anti-bribery, business continuity, quality, health and safety, to name just but a few, the list is endless actually, then we'd love you to come and join us. Just head over to the isologyhub.com.
Hi everybody, this is Ian Battersby, Senior ISO Consultant with Blackmores UK Limited. Welcome to another ISO show in a long series. I'm going to be talking to you today about the strategic alignment of objectives. So, what am I talking about? You're thinking. I'll explain. This is possibly quite a tricky one, actually, at times. And it's something that I don't think everybody's always got their head around, if I'm honest. But for me, it's been a quite transformative concept in driving management systems, in making them a real part of how businesses operate, and actually in helping organisations to improve how they operate by adopting the principles in the standards. The term strategic direction appears in ISO 9001 5 times, so it's not overly used in the standard, but I think it's quite profound in what it's trying to do. Let me explain what it's all about, but firstly I want to go back a few years to the days before Annex SL. For those unfamiliar with this terminology, Annex SL is the framework which was adopted by ISO in 2015 to provide a high-level structure for management systems. The term Annex SL doesn't seem to be used very much anymore, but it was all the rage 10 years ago when we were first talking about it. Its real value in system standards is in providing a common language and a structure for all organisations to use when developing their management systems. Prior to that, standards looked very different and varied depending on the sphere from which they grew. The profession, the sector, or the industry, The history of each in its isolation dictated the way it looked, the format, the structure, the language, the intent even of it. Integrated management systems back then were quite difficult because of that divergence in the standards. Another issue back then was that management systems were very focused on a specific aspect of an organisation, for example, on quality assurance, quality control as the terms used back then, but didn't really look at their contribution to an organisation as a whole. Consequently, certification was quite achievable without ever demonstrating that a management system did anything concrete to improve an organisation, not markedly anyway. I often use the story of there being a little chap or maybe a lady in overalls in an office off the shop floor of a manufacturing business with a room full of procedures and manuals, which would easily get certification to the old ISO 9001, but would do nothing to affect the customer or the bottom line of the company. So I think Annex SL arose out of that background. There was a recognition, I think, that management systems are isolated from business and that those varied styles created tensions and were an obstacle to integration with each other in terms of management systems, but also with the business. So the new structure of the standards was born. Subsequent reviews of existing standards have all brought those into line with Annex SL, and all new standards, management system standards that is, have been built in that format. I'll talk about ISO 9001, but the language used is exactly the same whether you're talking about environment, 14,001, health and safety, 45,001, 50,001 for energy management, 27,001, you name it, that all of them include similar terminology. And it begins with the leadership clause, clause 5, and specifically the first part of that. What that says is that top management shall demonstrate leadership and commitment with respect to the management system by ensuring that the policy and objectives are established for the management system and are compatible with the context and strategic direction of the organisation. So this is where we begin to look at management being responsible for ensuring that things are set up in line with the way the business runs. And then it goes on to say that they're also responsible for ensuring the integration of the system into the organisation's business processes. So that gives us a clue now as to where we're going with this. It also, further down in the standard in clause 9.3, which is management review, it states that top management shall review the organisation's system at planned intervals to ensure its continuing suitability, adequacy, effectiveness, and, here we go, alignment with the strategic direction of the organisation. So the standard's quite specific in that leadership must ensure from the outset that policy and objectives are established, aligned to the strategic direction, and at the end of the standard, management must review to see that there is a continuing alignment with the strategic direction of the organisation. So it's quite significant. It's not a lot of words, really. There's only a few words there, but as I said earlier, it's quite profound. So note that I said that leadership must ensure that policy and objectives are established for the management system. So this should come from the top. Firstly, from those who direct the organisation and its strategy. So they should be involved at the outset in this establishment of policy objectives. So top management who direct the organisation should be involved at this point. And also note that I said that leadership must ensure that the policy and objectives are compatible with the strategic direction and the context. So again, from the top of the organisation, those who direct must be involved in establishing context. And lo and behold, we have a clause in clause 4 on context of the organisation. And it says the organisation shall determine the external and internal issues which are relevant. And they're relevant to its purpose and its strategic direction. Now, that's important, okay? And it also says that you need to understand the external context by looking at issues arising from legal, technical, competitive, market, cultural, social, and economic environments. So you need to consider who's best to determine these issues. Top management, a broader management cross-section, operational staff, staff who are specialists in certain fields, technical, marketing, legal fields. Okay? So the context discussion can be influenced by an awful lot of people. But what's clear right at the beginning is top management must direct that in order to influence how a management system is built, and also, therefore, to influence how policy and objectives are built. Now, in other matters of context, the standards also require an understanding of the needs and expectations of interested parties. Okay. Now, interested parties are those parties which can affect or be affected by, or even perceive themselves to be affected by, a decision or activity of the organisation. Okay? And you've got to look at the potential effects on the organisation's ability to consistently provide products and services to meet requirements. So you can't, in establishing context, you can't divorce the people involved from the world around them. People need to understand the relationships with the different parties who are affected by the management system. So again, you have to consider who is best placed here. Now, the standards proceed into planning in Clause 6, which is firstly looking at identifying actions to address risks and opportunities. And in this side of planning things, the organisation has to consider the issues referred to in the discussions on context I've just talked about. And the risks and opportunities must be related to that context. So the context is about the direction of the organisation and how it relates to the parties and the world around it. And the risks must be associated with that. Not very narrow risk, but risk in how the organisation operates. And Clause 6 goes on to state that objectives must be established at relevant functions, levels and processes. Now, the way we operate in Blackmores as an organisation is that we directly relate the findings from risk and opportunities assessments to the establishment of objectives in order to try and minimise those risks or indeed take advantage of the opportunities. So you can see there's a link there. So to tie some of these together, what does it in practice actually mean? Many businesses now build their mission, vision, values, their strategy, their strategic direction around sustainability, around ESG, so environmental social governance reporting. And in fact, I, not so long ago, talked with my colleague Alison on the subject and how standards can support ESG reporting. But they are now fundamentally drivers in many organisations' direction. And when you build a management system, you must consider how it affects those sustainability goals, because that is the context of your organisation. If you are building your organisation's goals around its long-term sustainability, that's the context for your management system also. So you need to consider, how does environmental performance, for instance, or health and safety performance, or legal compliance, or any matter such as that contribute to the organisation's success as a whole? Even a quality management system contributes to sustainability in that it can reduce unexpected outcomes and hence improve economic performance and even improve waste. So it has an environmental impact. Seeing in that context then helps to integrate a management system with the business processes and also with other management systems. If you're integrating management systems, you can look at your context document in the broadest sense possible. Now, looking at sustainability goals, sustainability covers issues such as economy and financial matters and those sorts of things. So don't be afraid to relate economic performance to a management system. If your plan as an organisation is to grow turnover by X% per year, say that in your context documents, but also therefore consider how will your management system contribute to that through its processes, controls, performance monitoring, improvement activities. Another example, in an organisation, a manufacturing organisation I work for, we used to measure various quality metrics, which directly contributed to the economic performance of the company, therefore its strategic direction. Those measures covered things like the cost of non-conformity, i.e. product which was built wrongly and internally identified. Things such as liquidated damages, specifically in their sense it meant the costs applied by customers for delayed delivery and other matters such as that. It covered things like warranty claims, so costs for items which were delivered in a faulty condition to the customer, which they then claimed back from us. So they are quality measures, but they have very, very much economic measures as well. They have a direct impact on the economic performance of the business and also on sustainability in regards to the perception of customers of the quality of our product and the quality of our service. Another area that may be of consideration is if your clients tell you that you must have an accident rate of below X, whether that's injuries or reportable incidents or whatever it might be, per 100,000 hours, for instance, of work, say that in your context documents. But also, therefore, consider what measures you will take in your management system to achieve that. So these types of things, growth, cost of nonconformity, accident rates, these are the sorts of things that should set the scene for generating your objectives. But they should generate your objectives because they are identified in your context documentation, because they're aligned to your strategic direction, and because the risks have been assessed and any opportunity arising has been assessed, and because the right people have been involved at the right levels from the outset in all of those stages, not just because it seems like a good idea. Don't write your objectives first because you think it's a good approach, and then look at your context documents. The standards are written in the way they are in order to create the plan, do, check, act cycle. So to recap as to how we arrive at objectives which are strategically aligned. So we must establish context. We've talked all along about context, and that context must be relevant to the purpose and strategic direction of the business. The context setting must include those who understand that context, the strategic direction and the purpose of the business. The risks and opportunities must be assessed in relation to that context and hence the strategic direction, and the objectives must be set in relation to those risks and opportunities. Now, the standards are pretty specific, as I mentioned earlier. Top management must ensure that the policy and objectives are established and compatible with the context and strategic direction. And top management must review in order to ensure the continuing alignment to that context and strategic direction. So it's about the right people identifying the relevant issues affecting the real reason the organisation exists and identifying something concrete in order to improve that. I hope that's made some sense. It's an area where auditing can be a challenge, and actually establishing that link through evidence can be quite difficult. But I think it is doable, and I think by following through the standards correctly can give you a good steer in how to do that. So that's it for this episode. Thank you for listening. Before I go, I'd just like to remind people to subscribe on your preferred media player, if you've not already done so, that is. And if you can spare us just a few minutes, please could you leave us a nice, hopefully 5-star review? This really helps us to reach a wider audience as well. So we would really appreciate if you do that. As always, if you have any questions or even some suggestions for future topics, please feel free to get in touch. Send us an email or add a comment to the item in the media player. We'd love to hear from anybody who's got any form of feedback. That's all from me today. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch up with you on the next ISO show. Goodbye.
Looking to use ISO standards to drive better business practice? Contact us at blackmoresuk.com to access further information and book your free 15-minute call.